Chapter 1. The telegrams, shadow the rain pattered softly against the windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, a gentle rhythm that did little to disturb the fastidious detective as he arranged his morning correspondence with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. The room was a study in order, polished mahogany desk, neatly stacked papers, and a silver tray bearing a single porcelain cup of steaming tisane. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in a plush armchair by the fire, flipped through a newspaper with a distracted air, his mind more on the dismal weather than the headlines. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice sharp yet melodic, "you are restless this morning. The news, it does not hold your attention." Hastings lowered the paper, offering a sheepish grin. "It's this confounded rain, Poirot. Makes one feel trapped indoors. Haven't you anything exciting to occupy us?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled with amusement as he adjusted his perfectly knotted tie. "Patience, Hastings. The little grey cells, they require no storm to stir them into action. But perhaps," he paused, his attention caught by a small cream-coloured envelope on the tray, half hidden beneath a letter from his tailor. "What is this?" With a delicate touch, Poirot lifted the envelope, his brow furrowing as he noted its worn edges and faint smudges. It was a telegram, its paper yellowed as if it had travelled through time as well as distance. The address was scrawled in a hurried hand, and the ink had faded to a ghostly shade, rendering parts of the message nearly illegible. Poirot's moustache twitched as he slit the envelope open with a silver letter opener, extracting the thin slip within. "Curious," he murmured, holding the telegram to the light. "Very curious indeed." Hastings leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Poirot?" "A case." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone measured. He read aloud, his voice tracing the fragmented words. "Danger. Blackthorn Manor, St. Mary's Hollow, come at once, family, peril." The rest, it is too faded to decipher. No signature, no clear sender. Most irregular. "Mary's Hollow," Hastings echoed, scratching his chin. "Never heard of it. Sounds like some sleepy village in the middle of nowhere." "Precisement," Poirot said, tapping the telegram against his palm. "And yet, someone in this sleepy village has taken the trouble to send for Hercule Poirot. The method, it intrigues me. A telegram, faded and cryptic. Why not a letter? Why not a telephone call? There is intention here, Hastings, and intention is the thread that unravels the mystery." Hastings grinned, his earlier restlessness replaced by anticipation. "So, we're off to St. Mary's Hollow then." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he studied the telegram once more. "Oui, mon ami. The little grey cells, they demand satisfaction. We shall depart this afternoon." By early evening, the train rattled through the misty English countryside, its wheels clacking a steady rhythm as Poirot and Hastings sat in a first-class compartment. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat, gazed out at the rolling hills, his mind clearly elsewhere. Hastings, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Bound to be an adventure, eh, Poirot? A mysterious telegram, a remote village, sounds like something out of a novel." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Life, Hastings, is often more curious than fiction. But I caution you, this telegram, it is not merely a call for help, it is a puzzle, a challenge. Someone wishes for Poirot to see what others have overlooked." The train deposited them at a small windswept station as dusk settled over the landscape. St. Mary's Hollow was as quaint as its name suggested, a cluster of stone cottages nestled in a valley, their chimneys puffing smoke into the fog. A horse-drawn cart, arranged by Poirot's foresight, awaited them, its driver a taciturn man with a weathered face who introduced himself as Tom Grimsby. "Blackthorn Manor, is it?" Grimsby said, eyeing them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Not many visitors go up there. Strange folk, the Langleys. Strange, you say? Poirot's tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. In what way, monsieur? Grimsby shrugged, urging the horse forward. Keep to themselves mostly. Big old house, full of secrets. Been talk in the village, odd goings-on. Lights in the windows at night, that sort of thing. Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot, his imagination already running wild. Poirot, however, remained impassive. His fingers steepled as the cart trundled along a winding lane. The air grew colder, the fog thicker, as Blackthorn Manor loomed into view, a sprawling Gothic pile of weathered stone, its turrets piercing the mist like silent sentinels. At the manor's heavy oak door, they were greeted by a butler, Mr. Grayson, whose stiff demeanour and pale face suggested he was unaccustomed to visitors. "Lady Eleanor is expecting you," he said, leading them into a grand hall, adorned with faded tapestries and a towering chandelier. The air carried the musty scent of old wood and wax, and the silence was broken only by the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. Lady Eleanor Langley, a tall woman with iron-grey hair and a commanding presence, awaited them in the drawing-room. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, lingered on Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool, "I was informed of your arrival, though I confess I do not understand why you are here." Poirot inclined his head, his manner courteous but probing. "A telegram, Madame, sent to my address in London. It speaks of danger, of peril to your family. You know nothing of this?" Lady Eleanor's expression tightened, a flicker of unease crossing her features. "A telegram? I sent no such thing. This is most irregular." "Indeed," Poirot said, producing the faded slip from his pocket and holding it out. "Yet here it is, and it has brought Hercule Poirot to your door." As Lady Eleanor examined the telegram, her hands trembled slightly, though she quickly composed herself. Hastings watched, sensing the undercurrent of tension in the room. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the walls, and Poirot's gaze swept the space, taking in every detail: the heavy curtains, the locked cabinet in the corner, the faint dust on the mantelpiece. "Madame," Poirot said softly, "I believe there is more to this matter than meets the eye. With your permission, I shall remain to uncover the truth." Lady Eleanor hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Very well, Monsieur Poirot. But I warn you, Blackthorn Manor keeps its secrets closely guarded." Poirot smiled, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. "And I, Madame, am most adept at coaxing secrets into the light." As the butler led them to their rooms, Hastings whispered, "What do you make of it, Poirot? That telegram, it's downright eerie." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Eerie perhaps, but deliberate. The faded ink, the cryptic words, they are breadcrumbs, Hastings leading us to a truth someone wishes to conceal. The game, it has begun." Chapter 2. The Manor of Secrets. The heavy oak door of Blackthorn Manor creaked shut behind Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings, sealing them within the cavernous hall, as if the house itself were swallowing them whole. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and beeswax, and the flickering light of the chandelier above cast jagged shadows across the stone floor. Poirot's keen eyes darted about, noting the faded tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, their colours muted by time, and the ornate staircase that spiralled upward into darkness. Hastings, less attuned to such details, shivered slightly, his breath visible in the chill of the unheated hall. "Rather a gloomy place, isn't it, Poirot?" Hastings whispered, his voice echoing faintly. "Feels like we've stepped into one of those Gothic novels you're always poking fun at." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Gloomy perhaps, mon ami, but alive with secrets. A house such as this, it speaks, if one knows how to listen." He adjusted his gloves and turned to the butler, Mr. Grayson, who stood rigidly by the door. "Monsieur, if you would be so kind as to introduce us to the household." Grayson inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "This way, sir." He led them through a maze of corridors, each lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow their progress. The manor was a labyrinth of high ceilings and narrow passages, with unexpected alcoves and locked doors that piqued Poirot's curiosity. He paused briefly at a heavy velvet curtain, peering behind it to reveal a concealed passageway, its entrance cloaked in shadow. "Curious," Poirot murmured, filing the discovery away in his meticulous mind. They were ushered into a drawing-room, where the Langley family awaited. Lady Eleanor Langley stood by a roaring fire, her posture as unyielding as the iron poker in her hand. Her grey eyes assessed Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Beside her sat her son, Edmund Langley, a man in his early 30s, with a lean frame and a nervous habit of tugging at his cufflinks. His dark hair was impeccably combed, but his eyes darted about, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Across the room, near a grand piano, stood Miss Clara Wentworth, the governess, her auburn hair pinned tightly, and her expression guarded. A young girl, perhaps 10, clung to Clara's skirt, presumably her charge, Charlotte Langley. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Lady Eleanor said, her voice clipped. "I trust your journey was tolerable. This is my son, Edmund, and Miss Wentworth, who looks after my granddaughter, Charlotte." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes scanning each face. "A pleasure, madame, messieurs, mademoiselle. I am here to investigate the matter of the telegram. Perhaps you might shed light on its origins." Edmund shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tightening on his cufflinks. "As Mother said, we know nothing of any telegram. It's absurd to think we'd summon a detective to this house." "Absurd, perhaps," Poirot replied smoothly, "but the telegram exists, and it speaks of danger. Hercule Poirot does not ignore such a call." He produced the faded slip, holding it delicately, as if it were a rare artifact. "The ink, it is unusual. The message incomplete, yet it was sent with purpose." Miss Clara's eyes flickered briefly to the telegram, then away, her lips pressing into a thin line. Charlotte, the child, stared at Poirot with wide, curious eyes, but remained silent. Lady Eleanor's grip on the poker tightened. "This is a private household, Monsieur Poirot. We have no secrets here." Poirot's smile was polite, but unyielding. "Every household, madame, has its shadows. It is my profession to bring them to light." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of tea, served by a young maid, who moved with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to being invisible. As she set the tray down, Poirot noticed her hands tremble slightly, and a single teaspoon clattered to the floor. She flushed, retrieving it quickly, but Poirot's gaze lingered on her retreating figure. "Tell me, madame," Poirot said, turning back to Lady Eleanor, "who resides in this manor, besides those present?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, then listed the household: herself, Edmund, Charlotte, Miss Clara, Mr. Grayson, the maid Sarah, and a cook, Mrs. Harrow. "A small staff for such a large estate," she added, "but we manage." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone neutral but his mind racing. He sipped his tea, noting the faint bitterness of the blend, and observed the family's interactions. Edmund's nervous energy contrasted with Lady Eleanor's icy control, while Miss Clara's silence seemed calculated, as if she were guarding a thought too dangerous to voice. After tea, Grayson showed Poirot and Hastings to their rooms on the second floor. The corridors were lined with more portraits, their gilded frames tarnished, and the floorboards creaked underfoot. Poirot paused at a locked door, its brass handle polished as if recently used. "What lies beyond this door, Monsieur Grayson?" "The late Mr. Langley's study," Grayson replied, his voice flat. It has been locked since his passing 5 years ago. Locked yet polished, Poirot noted, his eyes gleaming. Most interesting. Their rooms were adjacent, overlooking the manor's overgrown gardens, where mist curled like ghostly fingers around gnarled trees. Hastings flopped onto his bed, exhaling dramatically. What a queer lot, Poirot. That Edmund fellow looks like he's hiding something, and Lady Eleanor's about as welcoming as a winter storm. Poirot stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the dim light. They are all hiding something, Hastings. The question is not if, but what, and why. The telegram, it was sent from this village, perhaps from this very house. The faded ink, the cryptic words, they are deliberate, a puzzle designed to draw Poirot here. Hastings propped himself up on his elbows. But who sent it, and why not just say what the danger is? Poirot turned, his expression grave. Because, mon ami, the sender fears discovery. The danger is close, perhaps within these walls. We must observe, listen, and above all, think. As night fell, the manor seemed to settle into an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant howl of wind through the chimneys. Poirot, seated at a small desk in his room, examined the telegram again, his magnifying glass tracing the smudged postmark. St. Mary's Hollow, he murmured. The answer lies here, in the heart of this manor. A faint creak sounded from the corridor outside, too deliberate to be the house settling. Poirot's head snapped up, his senses alert. Hastings, he whispered, the game, it grows more interesting by the hour. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Village. The morning sun struggled through the thick fog that blanketed St. Mary's Hollow, casting a pale, ethereal glow over the village's cobbled streets. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stepped out of the cart that had brought him and Captain Hastings from Blackthorn Manor. The air was damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and wood smoke, and the village seemed to huddle beneath the mist as if guarding its secrets. Hastings, pulling his coat tighter against the chill, glanced at Poirot with a mix of curiosity and unease. "Not exactly a cheerful place, is it, Poirot?" Hastings remarked, eyeing the shuttered windows of the cottages. "Feels like everyone's watching us." Poirot's green eyes scanned the street, noting the subtle twitch of a curtain in a nearby window. "Précisément, mon ami. A village such as this, it is a tapestry of whispers, and whispers, they often lead to truth." He adjusted his hat and set off toward the post office, his cane tapping rhythmically on the cobblestones. Their first stop was the small, ivy-covered post office at the heart of the village. A bell jingled as they entered, and a nervous-looking man in his 50s, with thinning hair and wire-rimmed spectacles, looked up from behind the counter. His nameplate read, "Mr. Harold Finch, Postmaster." His hands fidgeted with a stack of envelopes, and his eyes darted to the door as if expecting someone else. "Bonjour, Monsieur Finch," Poirot said, his voice smooth but commanding attention. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings. We are investigating a matter concerning a telegram sent from this village." Finch's face paled, and he dropped an envelope, which fluttered to the floor. "A tea telegram," he stammered, retrieving it with trembling hands. "I handle dozens of telegrams, sir. Can't say I recall anything specific." Poirot produced the faded telegram, holding it delicately between gloved fingers. "This telegram, monsieur. Sent to my address in London, speaking of danger at Blackthorn Manor. The ink, it is faded, the message incomplete. You recognize it, perhaps?" Finch peered at the slip, his spectacles slipping down his nose. It's one of ours, I suppose, but the state of it. I don't know how it got so faded. Must have been mishandled." His voice wavered, and he avoided Poirot's gaze, busying himself with sorting letters. Poirot's moustache twitched. Mishandled, you say? Yet the address, it is clear enough to reach me. Tell me, Monsieur Finch, who in this village might have sent such a message? Finch shook his head vigorously. No one, sir. The Langleys, they keep to themselves. No one from the manor's been here in weeks, except maybe the maid, Sarah, for errands. I can't help you. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he smiled politely. Very well, monsieur. But the little grey cells, they will remember this conversation. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Do you keep records of telegrams sent? Finch hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but they're not always detailed. I can check if you like. Do so, Poirot said firmly. And report to me at the manor if you find anything of interest. Outside, Hastings frowned. He's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see how he jumped when you showed him the telegram? Indeed, Poirot replied, his gaze sweeping the village square. Monsieur Finch is a man who fears discovery. But of what, we shall see. Their next stop was the village pub, the Rusty Anchor, a low-beamed establishment filled with the murmur of locals. The barkeep, a stout woman named Mrs. Dobbs, greeted them with a wary nod. Poirot, ever charming, ordered tea and engaged her in conversation, subtly steering it toward Blackthorn Manor. The Langleys, oh, they're a queer lot, Mrs. Dobbs said, wiping a glass with a rag. Lady Eleanor runs that house like a fortress. Her husband, old Mr. Langley, died years back, some say under odd circumstances. And that son of hers, Edmund, always skulking about. Never mixes with us folk. Odd circumstances, Poirot prompted, sipping his tea. Mrs. Dobbs leaned closer, lowering her voice. Talk was, he was poisoned, though it was ruled an accident. Heart trouble, they said. But there were whispers, servants saw things, letters going missing. Then there's that governess, Miss Clara, came out of nowhere, she did. Some reckon she's got her own secrets. Hastings leaned in, intrigued. What sort of secrets? Mrs. Dobbs shrugged. No one knows for sure, but she's too quiet, too watchful, and that child Charlotte, poor thing, always looks frightened. Poirot filed away each detail, his mind weaving connections. As they left the pub, he spotted an elderly man sitting on a bench, a walking stick across his knees and a worn book in his hands. His weathered face and sharp eyes suggested a man who saw more than he let on. Excusez-moi, monsieur, Poirot said, approaching. I am Hercule Poirot. You are a resident of long standing, perhaps. You know of Blackthorn Manor. The man looked up, his eyes narrowing. I'm Josiah Crane, village historian. Know the Langleys better than most. What's your business with them? A telegram, Poirot said, watching Crane closely. It speaks of danger. You have heard of such troubles? Crane's expression darkened. The Langleys have had their share of troubles. A scandal years ago, a missing heir, some said cheated out of their birthright. Letters were burned, promises broken. If there's danger, it's rooted in that house's past. Poirot's interest sharpened. This missing heir, who were they? Crane shook his head. No one knows for sure. The family hushed it up. But you mark my words, Monsieur Poirot, secrets like that don't stay buried. He glanced around, as if fearing eavesdroppers, and lowered his voice. If you're digging, watch your step. Not everyone in St. Mary's Hollow wants those secrets unearthed. As Poirot and Hastings made their way back to the cart, the fog seemed to thicken, curling around the cottages like a living thing. Hastings shivered. This place gives me the creeps, Poirot. Poisoned patriarchs, missing heirs, what's next? Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. Next, mon ami, we return to Blackthorn Manor. The village has spoken, and its whispers point to a truth hidden within those walls. The telegram, it is but the first thread in a tangled web. As they climbed into the cart, Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Finch's nervousness, Mrs. Dobbs' gossip, Crane's cryptic warning. The faded telegram, he knew, was no accident. It was a beacon, drawing him deeper into the shadows of St. Mary's Hollow. Chapter 4. The Faded Ink. All the morning light filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor's library, casting a pallid glow over the rows of leather-bound books and the long oak table where Hercule Poirot sat, his magnifying glass poised over the faded telegram. The room was silent, save for the soft tick of a mantel clock and the occasional crackle of the fire in the grate. Captain Hastings, perched on a ladder to inspect a high shelf, glanced down at his friend with a mix of amusement and impatience. "Poirot, you've been staring at that scrap of paper for ages," Hastings said, descending with a thud. "It's barely legible. What do you hope to find?" Poirot's green eyes remained fixed on the telegram, his mustache twitching as he traced the smudged ink. "Patience, mon ami. The telegram, it is not merely a message, it is a canvas of clues. The ink, the paper, the postmark, they speak to Hercule Poirot, if one listens closely." He tilted the telegram, catching the light. "Observe, Hastings. The ink, it is not uniformly faded. Some words, danger, Blackthorn, they resist time more than others. This is not accident, but design." Hastings leaned over Poirot's shoulder, squinting. "Design? You mean someone deliberately faded it?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his voice low. "Or the ink, it is of a peculiar composition, one that fades unevenly. I have seen such inks before, used in documents meant to conceal their age or origin." He set the magnifying glass aside and produced a small notebook, jotting down observations with precise, elegant strokes. "The postmark, it confirms St. Mary's Hollow, but the date, it is smudged, as if to obscure when it was sent." Before Hastings could respond, the library door creaked open and Edmund Langley entered, his lean frame tense and his eyes shadowed. He paused, clearly startled to find them there. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice clipped. "I didn't expect to find you here. This is a private room." Poirot rose, his manner courteous but unyielding. "Monsieur Langley, a private room it may be, but it is also a place where truth may hide. Tell me, what do you know of a locked study in this manor? The butler, Monsieur Grayson, mentioned it belongs to your late father." Edmund's fingers tugged at his cufflinks, a nervous tick Poirot had noted before. "The study, it's been locked since father's death. No one goes in there. It's a family matter." "A family matter," Poirot repeated, his tone deceptively mild. "Yet a telegram speaks of danger to your family, sent from this very village. Perhaps the study holds answers. None?" Edmund's face tightened, a flush creeping up his neck. "I don't see what an old study has to do with your telegram. You're prying into things that don't concern you." Hastings bristled, but Poirot raised a hand to silence him. "Monsieur, when Hercule Poirot is summoned, all things concern him. The telegram, it was sent with purpose. If you know nothing of it, perhaps you know why someone in this house might fear danger." Edmund's eyes darted to the telegram on the table, then away. "This is absurd. We're a respectable family. There's no danger here, only your imagination." He turned to leave, but Poirot's voice stopped him. "One moment, monsieur. The study, where is its key?" Edmund hesitated, his hand on the doorframe. "Mother keeps it, but you'll get nothing from it. It's just old papers, nothing more." He strode out, leaving the door ajar. Hastings exhaled. "Touchy fellow, isn't he? You struck a nerve, Poirot." "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Monsieur Edmond is a man who fears the light of scrutiny. The study, it is a thread we must follow." He returned to the telegram, tilting it again. "And this ink, it's secret. It will not elude Poirot for long." Their work was interrupted by a sudden piercing scream that echoed through the manor's corridors, chilling in its intensity. Hastings jumped, nearly knocking over a chair, while Poirot's head snapped up, his senses alert. The scream came again, fainter but no less urgent, from somewhere deep within the house. "Good heavens!" Hastings exclaimed. "What was that?" Poirot was already moving, his cane tapping rapidly as he headed for the door. "Quickly, Hastings! The sound, it comes from the upper floors. We must investigate." They hurried through the labyrinthine corridors, guided by the fading echo of the scream. The manor seemed to pulse with unease, its shadows deepening as they climbed the grand staircase. Servants peered from doorways, their faces pale, but none offered an explanation. At the end of a long hallway, they found Miss Clara Wentworth, the governess, standing outside a bedroom, her face ashen and her hands clasped tightly. "Mademoiselle," Poirot called, his voice sharp. "What has happened?" Clara's eyes were wide with fear, but she composed herself quickly. "It was Charlotte," she said, her voice trembling. "She woke from a nightmare, screaming about a shadow in her room. I've calmed her, but it was unnerving." Poirot's gaze swept the hallway, noting a half-open door leading to another wing. "A nightmare, you say? Or perhaps something more tangible?" "May I see the child?" Clara hesitated, then nodded, leading them into a small bedroom where Charlotte sat on the bed, clutching a doll. The girl's eyes were red from crying, but she looked up at Poirot with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "It was a shadow," she whispered. "By the window, it moved." Poirot knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle Charlotte, you are very brave to tell me this. The shadow, it was a person, perhaps?" Charlotte shook her head. "I don't know. It was dark, and then it was gone." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, who looked uneasy. "Thank you, Petite," Poirot said, rising. "Rest now. Hercule Poirot will ensure no shadows trouble you again." Outside the room, Poirot's expression hardened. "A shadow that moves, Hastings. A nightmare, or a warning. The telegram, the locked study, this scream, they are pieces of the same puzzle." As they returned to the library, the manor's silence felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Poirot picked up the telegram once more, his mind racing. "The ink," he murmured. "It hides a secret, and so does this house. Tomorrow we shall seek the key to that study, and perhaps to the truth." Chapter 5. The Locked Study. The morning at Blackthorn Manor dawned grey and heavy, the fog outside pressing against the windows like a silent conspirator. Hercule Poirot stood in the corridor outside the late Mr. Langley's study, his gloved fingers tracing the polished brass handle of the locked door. The faint gleam of the metal, so unlike the tarnished fixtures elsewhere in the manor, intrigued him. Captain Hastings, at his side, shifted impatiently, his breath visible in the chilly air of the unheated hallway. "Poirot, are you sure about this?" Hastings whispered, glancing down the corridor. "Lady Eleanor won't be pleased if she catches us poking around her husband's study." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Mon ami, Lady Eleanor may guard her secrets, but Hercule Poirot does not require permission to seek the truth. The study, it calls to us." The telegram, the scream, the nervous Monsieur Edmund, all roads lead here. He produced a small leather pouch from his pocket, revealing a set of delicate tools. The key, it is with Lady Eleanor, but the lock, it will yield to Poirot. Hastings raised an eyebrow, half amused, half aghast. You're going to pick the lock? That's hardly sporting, old chap. Sporting, Poirot replied, his voice low but sharp. This is not a game of cricket, Hastings. It is a puzzle, and the lock is but a piece. With practiced precision, he inserted a slender tool into the keyhole, his movements as deft as a surgeon's. After a moment, a soft click echoed in the silent corridor, and the door creaked open. The study was a time capsule, untouched by the years since Mr. Langley's death. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the heavy curtains, illuminating a large mahogany desk cluttered with papers, a bookshelf sagging under the weight of leather-bound tomes, and a row of stern portraits glaring down from the walls. The air was thick with the musty scent of old paper and ink. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he stepped inside, his cane tapping softly on the worn rug. "Magnifique," he murmured, surveying the room, a treasure trove of secrets, preserved as if waiting for Hercule Poirot. Hastings followed, his gaze drawn to a faded photograph on the desk, a younger Lady Eleanor and a stern man, presumably Mr. Langley, standing before the manor. "Looks like a grim sort," Hastings remarked. "No wonder the family's so tense." Poirot moved to the desk, his fingers brushing over a stack of ledgers. "Let us see what Monsieur Langley left behind." He opened the top ledger, revealing columns of figures, estate accounts, meticulously recorded. But a folded letter, tucked between the pages, caught his attention. Its paper was brittle, the ink faded but legible. Poirot unfolded it carefully, his magnifying glass poised. "Listen, Hastings," he said, reading aloud in a measured tone. "My dearest Eleanor, the matter of the inheritance must be settled. The claim, though buried, will not remain so. I fear for our future, if the truth is uncovered. It is unsigned, but the hand, it is precise, deliberate." Hastings frowned. "An inheritance sounds like trouble. Could this be tied to that missing heir the village historian mentioned?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "The letter, it speaks of a claim, a secret. The telegram too, warns of danger. The threads they begin to weave together." He turned to the desk's drawers, testing each one, most opened easily, revealing pens, inkwells, and mundane correspondence, but the bottom drawer was locked. Poirot's tools made quick work of the lock, revealing a small hidden compartment within the drawer. Inside lay a single key, its surface etched with an intricate design. Poirot held it up, his expression one of quiet triumph. "A key within a locked room, Hastings. This, it opens something of importance." Before Hastings could respond, a faint rustle came from behind a bookshelf. Poirot's head snapped up, his senses alert. "We are not alone," he whispered, motioning for Hastings to stay quiet. He approached the bookshelf, running his fingers along its edge, until he found a hidden catch. With a gentle push, a panel swung open, revealing a narrow passage cloaked in darkness. "Good heavens!" Hastings exclaimed, peering into the gloom. "A secret passage." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice low. "This manor, it is full of such surprises." But who, I wonder, was listening? He stepped into the passage, his torch casting a thin beam across damp stone walls. The air was cold, and the faint scent of mildew hung heavy. The passage stretched into darkness, but no sound betrayed the intruder's presence. They returned to the study, Poirot's mind racing. He pocketed the key and the letter, his expression grave. "We must speak with Lady Eleanor Hastings. This letter, this key, they are pieces of the puzzle, but the picture, it remains incomplete." As they left the study, locking the door behind them, they encountered Lady Eleanor in the corridor, her grey eyes blazing with barely concealed anger. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice icy, "I was informed you entered my husband's study. That room is private." Poirot bowed slightly, unruffled. "Madame, I seek only the truth. The telegram, it speaks of danger to your family. In the study, I found a letter, a matter of inheritance perhaps. You know of this?" Lady Eleanor's face tightened, her hands clenching. "My husband's affairs are no concern of yours. There is no danger here, only your meddling." Poirot's gaze held hers. "And yet, madame, a child screams of shadows, a telegram arrives faded and cryptic, and a locked study hides secrets. I will find the truth, with or without your assistance." Lady Eleanor turned abruptly, striding away without another word. Hastings watched her go, then turned to Poirot. "She's not telling us everything, is she?" "No, mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "But the study, it has spoken. The letter, the key, the hidden passage, they point to a secret buried deep within this family. And somewhere, in the shadows, someone watches our every move." As they returned to their rooms, the manor's silence felt heavier, its walls seeming to pulse with hidden truths. Poirot clutched the key tightly, his mind already piecing together the next steps in unraveling the mystery of the faded telegram. Chapter 6. The Governess' Tale. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor's conservatory, casting dappled shadows across the ferns and orchids that filled the glass-walled room. Hercule Poirot sat on a wrought iron bench, his posture impeccable despite the humid air, his eyes fixed on Miss Clara Wentworth, the governess, who stood arranging flowers in a vase. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, but her auburn hair, loosened slightly by the damp, betrayed a hint of unease. Captain Hastings, leaning against a nearby pillar, watched with his usual blend of curiosity and impatience, eager for Poirot to unravel the next piece of the puzzle. "Mademoiselle Wentworth," Poirot began, his voice smooth and deliberate, "you have been most quiet since my arrival. Yet, I suspect, you see much in this house. The telegram, the shadows, the secrets, perhaps you can shed light where others prefer darkness." Clara's hands paused over a rose, her fingers trembling slightly before she resumed her task. "I'm only the governess, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low. "My concern is Charlotte, not the family's affairs." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his skepticism. "Yet, mademoiselle, you live within these walls. You hear the whispers, the creaks in the night. The child, Charlotte, spoke of a shadow in her room. A nightmare, you said, but nightmares, they often have roots in reality. None." Clara's eyes flicked to Poirot, then away, focusing on the flowers. "Children have vivid imaginations. Charlotte is sensitive, easily frightened. I calmed her, as I always do." Hastings, unable to stay silent, stepped forward. "Come now, Miss Wentworth, you must know something. This house is crawling with secrets, locked studies, cryptic letters, that blasted telegram. You've been here long enough to notice things, haven't you?" Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment Poirot thought she might retreat into silence. But then, as if resolving an internal struggle, she set the vase down and faced them. "Very well," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was an incident years ago before I came to Blackthorn Manor. I've only heard fragments from servants' gossip and Charlotte's ramblings. It was a tragedy tied to Mr. Langley's death. Poirot leaned forward, his green eyes gleaming. A tragedy, mademoiselle. Tell me more. Clara hesitated, glancing toward the conservatory door, as if fearing eavesdroppers. It was 5 years ago. Mr. Langley died suddenly, officially of heart failure, but the servants whispered of poison. There was talk of a dispute, something about the family's fortune. A relative, they said, was cast out, their claim to the estate denied. The details were hushed up, and the servants who spoke of it were dismissed. Poirot's fingers steepled beneath his chin. A relative, cast out. This aligns with the village historian's tale of a missing heir. Do you know their name, mademoiselle? Clara shook her head. No one speaks of it openly. Lady Eleanor forbids discussion of the matter. But, she paused, her voice dropping lower. I've seen papers in the library. Old letters half burned in the fireplace. They mentioned a name, Amelia, but nothing more. Amelia, Poirot repeated, filing the name away. And these letters, where are they now? Gone, Clara said quickly. Burned to ash. I only saw them once, by chance. Hastings frowned, crossing his arms. Sounds like someone's covering their tracks. But why send a telegram now? After all this time? Poirot's gaze remained on Clara, noting the faint flush in her cheeks. A question most pertinent. Hastings. Mademoiselle, you are certain you know nothing of the telegram? Clara's eyes met his, steady but guarded. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I did not send it. My place is with Charlotte. I have no reason to stir up trouble. Before Poirot could press further, the conservatory door swung open, and Charlotte herself appeared, her small face pale but curious. She clutched her doll tightly, her eyes darting between the adults. Miss Clara, are you telling them about the ghostly visitor? She asked, her voice a mix of fear and excitement. Clara's expression softened, but a flicker of alarm crossed her face. Charlotte, darling, you shouldn't be out here. It was just a nightmare. Poirot knelt to Charlotte's level, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle Charlotte, you are most brave to speak of this visitor. Tell me, what did you see? Charlotte glanced at Clara, then leaned closer to Poirot. It wasn't a nightmare, she whispered. I saw it again last night, after the scream. A figure by the window, all in black, like a ghost. It looked at me, then disappeared. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. A figure in black, you say? Did it speak, petite? Charlotte shook her head. No, but it dropped something. I didn't tell Miss Clara. She'd say I was imagining things. She reached into a pocket and produced a small tarnished locket, its chain broken. It was on the floor by the window. Poirot took the locket, examining it under his magnifying glass. The clasp was stiff, but inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, with striking features, her name etched faintly on the back. Amelia. His heart quickened. This, mademoiselle, is most important. You have done well to show me. Clara's face paled, as she saw the locket. Charlotte, where did you get that? From the ghost, Charlotte insisted, clutching her doll tighter. Poirot rose, pocketing the locket. Mademoiselle Wentworth, this ghost is no spirit, but a person of flesh and blood. The locket, it connects to your tale of Amelia, the cast-out relative. We must learn more. Clara nodded, her expression troubled. I'll help however I can, Monsieur Poirot, but please be careful. This house, it holds grudges. As they left the conservatory, Hastings whispered, a ghostly visitor dropping lockets. This is getting stranger by the minute. Poirot. Strange. Yes, Poirot replied, his voice low, but not inexplicable. The telegram, the letter in the study, This locket, they are threads in a tapestry of betrayal. Someone in this manor, or perhaps the village, wishes the past to remain buried. But Hercule Poirot will not allow it. The conservatory door closed behind them, its glass panes rattling faintly in the wind. Outside, the fog seemed to thicken, cloaking Blackthorn Manor in an air of foreboding. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the clues: a faded telegram, a hidden letter, a tarnished locket, and a child's tale of a ghostly visitor. The truth, he knew, was drawing closer, hidden in the shadows of the manor's past. Chapter 7. Shadows. At midnight the clock in Blackthorn Manor's grand hall struck midnight, its chimes reverberating through the silent corridors like a warning. Hercule Poirot, seated in his room with a cup of cooling tisane, was poring over his notebook, the tarnished locket from Charlotte resting beside the faded telegram. His meticulous notes traced the threads of the mystery: the cryptic letter in the study, the name Amelia, and the governess's guarded tale. Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair, stifled a yawn, his eyes heavy from the day's investigations. "Poirot, it's beastly late," Hastings said, rubbing his eyes. "Can't the little grey cells take a rest?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Rest, mon ami. The night it is when secrets stir. The manor, it is awake, even if its occupants pretend to sleep." He closed his notebook, his senses sharp, when a sudden deafening crash shattered the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of splintering wood and shattering glass from the dining hall below. Good heavens! Hastings leapt to his feet, grabbing his dressing gown. What was that? Poirot was already at the door, his cane in hand. "Quickly, Hastings." The sound, it is no accident. They hurried down the grand staircase, the manor's shadows twisting in the flickering light of wall sconces. The air grew colder as they approached the dining hall, where a scene of chaos awaited. The massive chandelier, a Baroque confection of crystal and brass, lay in ruins across the long mahogany table, its candles extinguished and glass shards glittering like fallen stars. The heavy chain that had suspended it dangled from the ceiling, its links twisted and frayed as if deliberately cut. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the wreckage, his gloved fingers brushing the damaged chain. "Sabotage," he murmured. This was no fault of time or neglect. Someone wished to send a message, or worse. Hastings, wide-eyed, scanned the room. A message? Poirot, this could have killed someone. "The family dines here every evening." "Precisement," Poirot said, his voice low. "A warning perhaps, or an attempt to silence. We must learn who was meant to be beneath this chandelier." He knelt, examining a jagged piece of metal. The cut, it is clean in parts, made with a tool. This was planned. The commotion had roused the household. Lady Eleanor appeared at the doorway, her nightgown hastily covered by a shawl, her grey eyes blazing with indignation. "Monsieur Poirot, what is the meaning of this? My dining hall, destroyed." "Madame," Poirot said, rising. "This is no accident. The chandelier was tampered with. I must ask, who was last in this room?" Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "The servants prepared the table for tomorrow's breakfast, as always. No one else has been here since dinner." Edmund Langley arrived next, his face pale, and his hands fidgeting with his cufflinks. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "First a telegram, now this? Are you suggesting someone in my home did this?" Poirot's gaze was steady. "I suggest nothing, monsieur. I observe, and I observe that someone in this manor has a purpose most sinister." The butler, Mr. Grayson, and the maid, Sarah, appeared, both looking shaken. Sarah's hands twisted in her apron, and Grayson's usual composure was frayed. Poirot turned to them, his voice calm but probing. "Monsieur Grayson, Mademoiselle Sarah, you prepared this room tonight. Did you notice anything unusual? A stranger, perhaps, or a sound? Grayson shook his head. Nothing, sir. The room was as it should be when I locked up after dinner. Sarah, however, hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. I thought I heard footsteps in the corridor when I was setting the table, she said softly. But when I looked, no one was there. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Footsteps, mademoiselle. From which direction? From the east wing, Sarah said, her voice barely audible. Near the study. Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot, recalling the hidden passage they'd found in the locked study. Poirot nodded slightly, then addressed the group. This incident, it is connected to our mystery. The telegram, the locket, the letter, all point to a secret someone wishes to protect. I will require access to the East Wing tomorrow. Lady Eleanor's face hardened. You overstep, Monsieur Poirot. This is my home, and it is a home under threat, Poirot replied, unflinching. I will not rest until the truth is uncovered. As the household dispersed, Poirot and Hastings remained in the dining hall, the shattered chandelier a stark reminder of the danger lurking within the manor. Poirot examined the chain again, his magnifying glass revealing faint scratches around the cut links. A tool, yes, but handled with care, he said. This was no act of impulse. Hastings shivered, the room's chill seeping into his bones. Who'd do such a thing, Poirot? And why now? Poirot's expression was grave. Why now, Hastings? Because our presence, it stirs the hornet's nest. The telegram was a call to action, and this, he gestured to the wreckage, is a response. Someone fears what we will find. They returned to their rooms, the manor's corridors, darker and more oppressive in the wake of the incident. Poirot paused at a window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded gardens. The East Wing, Hastings, he said softly. The study, the passage, the footsteps, they are linked. And the locket, with its name Amelia, it is a key to the past. Hastings yawned, despite the adrenaline. You think this Amelia is behind it? A ghost dropping chandeliers? Poirot's smile was faint but determined. No ghost, mon ami. A person living and cunning, who moves in the shadows. Tomorrow we will search the East Wing, and we will find what they wish to hide. As they parted for the night, the manor settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant creak of a floorboard. Poirot's hand rested on the locket in his pocket, his mind racing. The faded telegram, the sabotaged chandelier, the name Amelia. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. Chapter 8. The Historian's Warning. A fog that clung to St. Mary's Hollow had thickened by midday, wrapping the village in a shroud that muffled sound and blurred the edges of the stone cottages. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the damp, walked purposefully along the cobbled path toward the village square, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. Captain Hastings, trailing slightly behind, pulled his scarf tighter, his face a picture of unease as they approached the bench where they had last seen Josiah Crane, the village historian. "Poirot, are you sure this is worth the trip?" Hastings asked, glancing at the shuttered windows around them. "Crane was cagey enough last time. What makes you think he'll spill more now?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed beneath the brim of his hat. "Mon ami, Monsieur Crane knows more than he shared. The locket with the name Amelia, the letter in the study, the sabotaged chandelier, these are threads of a tapestry, and Crane holds a needle. His warning of a missing heir, it is a clue we cannot ignore." They found Crane on the same bench, his weathered hands clutching a worn book, his eyes scanning the square with a wariness that hadn't been there before. His coat was patched, his scarf frayed, but his sharp gaze fixed on Poirot with a mix of recognition and apprehension. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot greeted, bowing slightly. "It is Hercule Poirot, returned to seek your wisdom. You spoke of a scandal, a missing heir of the Langley family. I must know more." Crane's fingers tightened on his book, and he glanced over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to emerge from the fog. "You're stirring up trouble, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low and rough. "I told you what I know last time. The Langleys don't take kindly to their secrets being aired." Poirot seated himself beside Crane, his posture impeccable despite the damp bench. "And yet, monsieur, a telegram summoned me. Speaking of danger, a chandelier falls in the night. A locket bears the name Amelia. These are not coincidences. Tell me of this scandal, this heir. Who was Amelia?" Crane's eyes darted to Hastings, then back to Poirot. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Amelia Langley was the younger sister of Edward Langley, Lady Eleanor's late husband. 20 years ago, there was a falling out, a bitter one. Edward's father, old Lord Langley, rewrote his will, cutting Amelia out entirely. She was young, headstrong, some said in love with the wrong sort. The family claimed she ran off, but there were rumors, dark ones." Poirot prompted, his tone gentle but insistent. Crane hesitated, his gaze flicking to the fog-shrouded street. "Some said she didn't leave willingly, that she was sent away to protect the family's fortune. The will was sealed, locked in that study you're so keen on. But papers went missing, and Amelia was never seen again. The village whispered of foul play, but the Langleys' money silenced most tongues." Hastings, leaning against a lamppost, frowned. "Foul play? You mean they did away with her?" Crane shook his head. "No proof, Captain. Just whispers, but I found something once, in the church records, a marriage certificate, half burned, with Amelia's name. It was hidden in the vicar's old files, as if someone tried to erase her existence." Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind racing. A marriage certificate. To whom was she married? Crane's face paled, and he glanced around again, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. "I don't know. The other name was burned away, but after I found it, I started getting notes, warnings to keep quiet. Someone's watching. Monsieur Poirot. You're digging too deep." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Warnings, monsieur. You have these notes?" Crane shook his head. "Burned them. I'm no fool. I know when to stop poking. You should too, if you value your safety." Hastings stepped closer, his voice indignant. "Now see here, Crane. If you're being threatened, you ought to tell us." Poirot's not one to back down from a bit of danger. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings. "Monsieur Crane, your fear, it is understandable, but it tells me much. The telegram, the locket, the chandelier, these are not the work of a ghost, but of someone who fears the truth of Amelia's fate. Tell me, who in this village might know more?" Crane's hands trembled, and he clutched his book tighter. "The old vicar maybe, but he's half mad now, living out by the moor. Or the postmaster, Finch, he sees everyone's business, but you won't get much from either. The Langleys' shadow looms large here." Poirot nodded, rising from the bench. "Merci, Monsieur Crane. Your words, they are most illuminating. Be assured, Hercule Poirot will tread carefully, but he will not stop." As they walked away, the fog seemed to close in, muffling their footsteps. Hastings glanced back at Crane, who sat hunched, staring into the mist. "He's scared stiff, Poirot. Do you think he's telling the truth about those warnings?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "His fear, it is genuine. The notes, the burned certificate, they confirm a secret buried deep. Amelia Langley, her story is the key to our mystery. They paused at the village square, where the post office's dim light flickered through the fog. Poirot's gaze lingered on it. Monsieur Finch, he was nervous when we questioned him. Perhaps he too has received warnings or sent them. Hastings shivered, the damp seeping into his coat. This place is getting under my skin. Poirot, a missing heir, burned papers, threats. It's like something out of a Gothic horror. Poirot's smile was faint but determined. A horror perhaps, but one with human hands behind it. The telegram, it was sent to draw us here, to uncover what was hidden. We return to the manor, Hastings, and we watch for the one who watches us. As they climbed into the waiting cart, the fog swirled thicker, and a distant sound, like a footstep on gravel, echoed faintly. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, his mind weaving the new clues into the tapestry of the case. Amelia's disappearance, a hidden marriage, a silenced village. The truth, he knew, was closer, lurking in the shadows of St. Mary's Hollow. Chapter 9. The Hidden Cipher. The library of Blackthorn Manor was a sanctuary of silence, its shelves heavy with the weight of forgotten knowledge. Hercule Poirot sat at the oak table, the faded telegram spread before him under the soft glow of a green-shaded lamp. His magnifying glass hovered over the paper, tracing faint marks that had escaped earlier scrutiny. Captain Hastings, pacing near the fireplace, cast impatient glances at his friend, the memory of the sabotaged chandelier and the historian's warning still fresh in his mind. "Poirot, you've been at that telegram for hours," Hastings said, pausing to warm his hands. "It's just a scrap of paper. What more can it tell us?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. "Mon ami? A scrap of paper it may be, but it is also a map to the truth. Observe." He pointed to a series of barely visible numbers scrawled in the telegram's margin, 512309. These numbers, they are not random, they are a cipher, a coordinate, hidden in plain sight. Hastings leaned over, squinting. "Coordinates? You mean like a treasure map?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Not a treasure, Hastings, but a secret. These numbers, they point to a location, perhaps within the grounds of Blackthorn Manor. We must investigate." He rose, tucking the telegram into his pocket and retrieving the etched key from the locked study. The key, the locket, the letter, and now this cipher, they are pieces of the same puzzle. They ventured into the manor's fog-shrouded gardens, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The grounds were a tangle of overgrown roses and ivy, with stone paths winding through the mist. Poirot, guided by a pocket compass and his meticulous calculations, counted paces from the manor's east wing, his cane sinking slightly into the soft ground. Hastings followed, his eyes darting to the shadows, half expecting another ghostly visitor to emerge. 51 paces north, Poirot murmured, counting aloud, 23 east, 9 south. His steps led them to a secluded corner of the garden, where a crumbling stone pavilion stood, its roof sagging and its windows boarded. Ivy clung to its walls, but a heavy iron door, rusted yet intact, barred entry. Poirot examined the lock, then produced the etched key. It fit perfectly, turning with a reluctant groan. "Good heavens, Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed as they stepped inside. "How did you know?" "The little grey cells, mon ami," Poirot replied, his torch illuminating the pavilion's interior. The space was small, its stone floor covered in dust, with a single object at its center, a locked wooden chest, its surface carved with intricate patterns resembling those on the key. Cobwebs draped its edges, but faint footprints in the dust suggested recent visitors. Poirot knelt beside the chest, his gloved fingers brushing away the grime. "This chest, it has been opened recently," he said, noting scratches around the lock. He inserted the key, and with a click, The lid creaked open, revealing a collection of papers, a small leather journal, and a sealed envelope. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he lifted the envelope, its wax seal bearing the Langley crest. Before he could open it, a sharp crack echoed from outside, followed by the sound of snapping branches. Hastings spun toward the door, his hand instinctively reaching for a non-existent revolver. "Someone's out there, Poirot." Poirot's voice was calm but urgent. "Quickly, Hastings, secure the chest." He pocketed the envelope and journal, then moved to the door, his torch sweeping the garden. The fog was thick, but a shadow darted between the trees, too swift to identify. Hastings, dragging the chest to the pavilion's corner, noticed a tripwire stretched across the doorway, its taut line barely visible. "Poirot, look out!" Hastings shouted, pulling him back just as a heavy stone slab, rigged above the door, crashed to the ground, shattering the flagstones where Poirot had stood moments before. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot exclaimed, his composure shaken. "A trap, Hastings. Someone does not wish us to uncover the chest's secrets." Hastings, panting, stared at the wreckage. "That could have killed us. Whoever's behind this is getting desperate." "Desperate, yes," Poirot said, regaining his calm, "and careless. The tripwire, it was hastily set. Our shadowy friend, they act in haste." He examined the wire, noting its crude knot. This was not the work of a professional, but of one who fears discovery. They returned to the chest, its contents now safely in Poirot's possession. The journal, he noted, was filled with cryptic entries in a feminine hand, mentioning Amelia and Betrayal. The envelope, still sealed, bore no address, but felt heavy, as if containing more than paper. Poirot tucked both away, his mind racing. "We must return to the manor," he said. "These documents, they will reveal much, but we are not safe here." As they retraced their steps, the fog seemed to pulse with menace, and the manor loomed like a silent sentinel. Inside, they found Lady Eleanor in the drawing-room, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said sharply, "I heard a commotion in the gardens. What have you done now?" Poirot's gaze was steady. "Madame, we have found a chest, hidden in a pavilion, containing papers that may explain the telegram's purpose. A trap was set to prevent our discovery. Someone in this house, or nearby, wishes to silence us." Lady Eleanor's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "A chest? Nonsense. The gardens are overgrown, forgotten. You're chasing phantoms." "Phantoms do not set traps," Poirot replied, his voice firm. "The name Amelia, it appears again. You know of her, perhaps?" Lady Eleanor's hands clenched, but she said nothing, turning away. Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. That trap, someone knew we were close." "We," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "The cipher, it led us to the truth, but the truth, it is dangerous. The journal, the envelope, they will speak, and we will listen." As they retired to their rooms, the manor's silence was heavy, broken only by the distant creak of a floorboard. Poirot clutched the envelope, its seal unbroken, his mind weaving the clues, the telegram's cipher, the chest's secrets, and a shadowy figure, desperate to stop them. The puzzle was nearing its heart, but the danger was closer than ever. Chapter 10. Betrayal in the Blood. The library of Blackthorn Manor was a fortress of shadows, its heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon's persistent fog. Hercule Poirot sat at the oak table, the sealed envelope and leather journal from the garden pavilion's chest before him. The etched key rested beside them, its intricate design catching the lamplight. Captain Hastings, pacing near the fireplace, cast anxious glances at the door, the memory of the sabotaged chandelier and the garden trap still fresh in his mind. "Poirot, are you sure it's safe to open that envelope here?" Hastings asked, his voice low. "Someone's already tried to crush us with a stone slab. What if they're watching?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed with determination. Mon ami, the danger, it is precisely why we must act. The chest, it was hidden for a reason. These papers, they hold the heart of our mystery. He broke the wax seal with a deft motion, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The journal, already open, revealed entries in a feminine hand, each page steeped in anguish and accusation. Poirot read the first letter aloud, his voice steady but grave. Edward, your betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. Amelia's claim was just, yet you and Eleanor conspired to erase her. The will, altered in secret, denies her birthright. I cannot forgive this. It is signed, Margaret. Hastings stopped pacing, his eyes wide. Margaret. Who's that? And Amelia again. This must be the missing heir Crane mentioned. We, Poirot said, his fingers tracing the letter's brittle edge. Margaret, perhaps a confidant or relative, knew of a scheme to alter the Langley will. Amelia, the cast-out sister, was denied her inheritance. This letter, it accuses Edward Langley and Lady Eleanor. He opened the journal, scanning its entries. Here, Margaret writes of a meeting in the pavilion, where Edward burned documents to conceal the truth. She feared for her life. Hastings leaned over, his face pale. Good heavens, Poirot. This is explosive. If Lady Eleanor and her husband cheated Amelia out of her inheritance, no wonder someone's desperate to keep it quiet. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The telegram, the locket, the cipher, all point to this betrayal. But who sent the telegram? Margaret, perhaps, or another, who knows the truth. He set the letters aside, his expression grave. We must confront the family, Hastings. The truth, it cannot be hidden any longer. They found Lady Eleanor, Edmund and Miss Clara in the drawing room, the air thick with tension. Charlotte played quietly in a corner. Her doll clutched tightly. Lady Eleanor's grey eyes narrowed as Poirot entered, the letters and journal in hand. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice icy. You've been meddling again. What now? Poirot held up the letters, his voice calm but unyielding. Madame, these letters found in a hidden chest speak of a great wrong. Amelia Langley, your husband's sister, was denied her inheritance. You and Monsieur Edward, it seems, altered the will. This is true, non? Lady Eleanor's face drained of colour, her hands clenching the arms of her chair. How dare you? Those are lies, fabricated to tarnish our name. Edmund leapt to his feet, his cufflinks glinting as he gestured wildly. This is outrageous. My father was an honourable man. Amelia ran off. Her choice, not ours. Poirot's gaze shifted to Edmund, his eyes piercing. Monsieur, your agitation betrays you. The journal, written by one Margaret, details a conspiracy. The pavilion, the burned documents, it is all here. And the telegram, sent to summon Hercule Poirot, warns of danger tied to this secret. Clara, silent until now, spoke softly. Monsieur Poirot, I told you of the rumours, the tragedy, but I never saw these letters. Could Margaret still be alive? Poirot turned to her, noting the flicker of fear in her eyes. A question most pertinent, mademoiselle. But there is more. He produced the locket, opening it to reveal Amelia's photograph. This, found by Charlotte, bears Amelia's name. And the telegram, its sender, I believe, is among us. The room fell silent, the only sound Charlotte's doll brushing against the rug. Then, unexpectedly, Sarah, the maid, appeared at the doorway, her face pale, and her hands trembling. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, I sent the telegram. Hastings gasped, and Lady Eleanor's head snapped toward Sarah. You? How dare you interfere in our affairs? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. "I had to, ma'am. My mother was Margaret, a maid here years ago. She told me about Amelia, how she was wronged. Before she died, she gave me the locket and made me promise to seek justice. I found the chest in the pavilion, saw the letters, and sent the telegram to you, Monsieur Poirot, hoping you'd uncover the truth." Poirot's moustache twitched, his mind aligning the pieces. "Mademoiselle Sarah, you are most brave." The telegram, it was faded deliberately, perhaps to mimic the age of the secret it revealed. "But why now?" Sarah's voice broke. "I heard Lady Eleanor and Mr. Edmund talking about selling the estate. If they did, the truth about Amelia would be buried forever. I couldn't let that happen." Lady Eleanor rose, her face a mask of fury. "This is nonsense. Sarah, you're dismissed." Poirot raised a hand. "Madame, dismissal will not erase the truth. The letters, the journal, they confirm Sarah's story. Amelia was betrayed, and someone in this house knows more." Edmund's face twisted, his voice hoarse. "Enough. You've no proof. This is all speculation." Poirot's gaze was relentless. "Wait, speculation, monsieur? The little grey cells, they do not speculate, they deduce. And they deduce that the danger in the telegram is real, perhaps to protect the secret, or to avenge it." As the confrontation ended, the family dispersed, their denials ringing hollow. Hastings whispered, "Sarah, the sender. That's a twist, Poirot. But what about Amelia? Is she alive?" Poirot's eyes were distant. "That, mon ami, is the question. The letters, the locket, Sarah's confession, they bring us closer, but the shadow in the night, the trap in the pavilion, someone still moves against us." The manor's silence returned, heavy with unspoken truths. Poirot clutched the journal, its pages a map to a betrayal, rooted in blood, and the mystery of Amelia Langley loomed larger than ever. Chapter 11. The Night-Time Pursuit. The moon hung low over Blackthorn Manor, its pale light struggling to pierce the thick fog that enveloped St. Mary's Hollow. Hercule Poirot stood by his bedroom window, the etched key and Margaret's journal resting on the desk behind him. The revelations of Sarah's confession that she had sent the faded telegram to expose the Langley family's betrayal of Amelia had set his mind ablaze. Captain Hastings, sitting on the edge of his bed, was recounting the day's confrontations, his voice tinged with excitement. "Poirot, Sarah's story changes everything," Hastings said, adjusting his dressing gown. "If she's telling the truth, Lady Eleanor and Edmund have been sitting on a scandal for years. But who's been setting traps? And is Amelia still out there?" Poirot's green eyes remained fixed on the gardens below, where shadows shifted in the mist. "The little grey cells, they work, mon ami." Sarah's telegram was a spark, but the fire, the traps, the chandelier, the shadowy figure burns from another hand. "Someone fears our progress." He paused, his senses sharpening, as a faint movement caught his eye, a cloaked figure darting across the lawn, vanishing into the fog. "Hastings!" Poirot snapped, grabbing his cane. "A figure in the gardens. Quickly, we must pursue." Hastings leapt to his feet, pulling on his coat as they hurried down the manor's grand staircase, their footsteps echoing in the silent halls. The front door was ajar, a chill draught confirming the intruder's recent passage. Outside, the fog was a living wall, muffling sound and obscuring the path. Poirot's torch cut through the gloom, its beam catching the faint outline of footprints in the damp grass, leading toward the village. "A cloak, dark and heavy," Poirot murmured, his pace brisk, despite the uneven ground. "This is no ghost, Hastings, but a person of purpose." They followed the trail down the winding lane, the village's silhouettes looming like spectres in the mist. The footprints veered toward the churchyard, where ancient gravestones tilted in the fog. Hastings, panting, gripped Poirot's arm. "There, Poirot. By the yew tree." The cloaked figure, a black silhouette against the grey haze, paused briefly, as if sensing pursuit, then sprinted toward the village square. Poirot, surprisingly agile, led the chase, his cane tapping rapidly as they navigated the cobblestones. The figure was swift, weaving between cottages, their cloak billowing like a shadow come to life. "Stop!" Hastings shouted, his voice swallowed by the fog. The figure darted into an alley beside the rusty Anchor pub, and Poirot, undeterred, followed, his torch illuminating discarded crates and puddles. A clatter echoed ahead. A trash bin overturned, and Poirot's beam caught a glimpse of the figure scaling a low wall. "After them," Poirot urged, though his polished shoes slipped on the wet stones. Hastings, more athletic, vaulted the wall, landing in a narrow lane where the fog was thickest. The figure was a mere shadow now, flitting toward the moor beyond the village. But as they rounded a corner, a glint on the ground caught Poirot's eye, a small silver cigarette case, its surface etched with the initials. Poirot snatched it up, his breath steady despite the chase. "A clue, Hastings. The figure they have left us a gift." He opened the case, revealing a single cigarette and a folded scrap of paper. The paper bore a hasty scrawl. "The truth lies in the vault." Hastings, catching his breath, peered over Poirot's shoulder. "Allo Amelia Langley. Is she the one we're chasing?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice low. "Or someone wishes us to believe so. The vault, this could be a crypt, a safe, or something else entirely. We must return to the manor, and consider." The figure had vanished into the moor's expanse, the fog closing like a curtain. Reluctantly, Poirot and Hastings retraced their steps, the cigarette case clutched tightly in Poirot's gloved hand. The village was silent, its windows dark, but Poirot's senses prickled with the feeling of being watched. Back at Blackthorn Manor, they gathered in the library, the fire casting long shadows across the room. Poirot examined the cigarette case under his magnifying glass, noting its worn edges and fine craftsmanship. "This is no common trinket," he said. "The initials, the message, they are deliberate, meant to guide or mislead." Hastings frowned, warming his hands by the fire. "Guide or mislead? Poirot, this is maddening. First Sarah's confession, now a chase through the fog. What's next?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Next, mon ami, we seek the vault." The journal mentioned a meeting in the pavilion. The letters spoke of a hidden will. "This note suggests a physical place where the truth is concealed. The manor, the church, perhaps the pavilion itself. We must search." A soft knock interrupted them, and Sarah the maid appeared, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I heard you leave the manor. Did something happen?" Poirot studied her, noting her genuine concern. "Mademoiselle Sarah, we pursued a figure in the night, who left this." He showed her the cigarette case. "Do you recognize it?" Sarah's eyes widened. "That, it looks like one my mother kept, with Miss Amelia's initials. She said it was a gift from someone Amelia loved." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A lover, perhaps. The marriage certificate Monsieur Crane mentioned. Could this be connected?" Sarah nodded hesitantly. "Mother never said who, but she hinted Amelia's banishment was tied to a forbidden romance. The family disapproved." Hastings leaned forward. "And this vault? Any idea what it might be?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't know, sir, but the church has an old crypt under the Langley family plot. It's locked, always has been." Poirot's mind raced, weaving the clues together, The telegram, Sarah's confession, the locket, the letters, and now a cigarette case, pointing to a vault. Merci, Mademoiselle Sarah. You have been most helpful. Tomorrow, we visit the church. As Sarah left, Hastings whispered, "A crypt, Poirot. This is getting downright macabre." "Macabre, yes," Poirot replied, his voice firm. "But the truth, it hides in such places. The figure we chased, they know we are close. The vault, it will reveal the final pieces of our puzzle." The manor settled into an uneasy silence, the fog pressing against the windows like a living thing. Poirot clutched the cigarette case, its message burning in his mind. The chase had failed, but the clue it left behind brought them one step closer to unraveling the mystery of the faded telegram. Chapter 12. The Truth Unraveled. The drawing-room of Blackthorn Manor was ablaze with the glow of candles, their flickering light casting long shadows across the gathered faces. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small frame commanding the room's attention with an air of quiet authority. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his eyes scanning the tense assembly. Lady Eleanor Langley, her face a mask of icy control, Edmund Langley fidgeting with his cufflinks, Miss Clara Wentworth, her auburn hair pinned tightly. Young Charlotte clutching her doll, Sarah the maid, wringing her hands, and Mr. Grayson, the butler, rigid as ever. From the village, Josiah Crane, the historian, and Harold Finch, the postmaster, sat uneasily among the manor's staff, their presence requested by Poirot's summons. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. "You are gathered, because a telegram, faded and cryptic, summoned Hercule Poirot to St. Mary's Hollow. It spoke of danger, of peril to the Langley family. Tonight, the little grey cells have unravelled the truth." Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. Your meddling has caused nothing but chaos." Poirot raised a hand, his moustache twitching. "Chaos, madame? No. Order. The telegram, it was a beacon, guiding me to a secret buried in this manor's heart. Let us begin with the clues." He produced the telegram, its faded ink gleaming faintly. The ink, deliberately faded, with a chemical to obscure its age, was sent by Mademoiselle Sarah. Sarah gasped, her face paling, but Poirot continued. "You confessed, mademoiselle, driven by your mother Margaret's tales of Amelia Langley's betrayal. You found the chest in the pavilion, sent the telegram to expose the truth, but the danger, it was not your doing." He turned to the chest's contents, holding up the letters and journal. "These reveal a conspiracy. Amelia Langley, sister to Edward Langley, was denied her inheritance by a falsified will, orchestrated by Edward and Lady Eleanor. Margaret, a loyal maid, documented this in her journal, fearing for her life." Edmund leapt to his feet, his voice shaking. "My father did no such thing." "Silence, monsieur," Poirot said sharply. "The locket, found by Mademoiselle Charlotte, bore Amelia's name and photograph. The cigarette case, dropped by a cloaked figure we chased, carried her initials and a note. The truth lies in the vault. But the vault is no crypt, it is a safe, hidden in the locked study." Poirot's gaze swept the room. The coordinates on the telegram, 512309, led to the pavilion, where the chest held Margaret's accusations. The sabotaged chandelier, the trap in the garden, they were acts of desperation to stop our discovery. But who set these traps? He turned to Clara Wentworth, whose eyes widened. "Mademoiselle Clara, you spoke of a tragedy, but your silence was calculated. You are no mere governess." The marriage certificate, Monsieur Crane found, half-burned, named Amelia and her husband, Clara's brother Robert Wentworth. The room erupted in gasps. Clara's face crumpled, tears welling. "It's true," she whispered. "Robert was my brother. He loved Amelia, but the Langleys disapproved. They banished her, altered the will to cut her out. Robert died of a broken heart, and I came here to learn the truth, to protect Charlotte, Amelia's daughter." Charlotte's eyes widened, clutching her doll tighter. Poirot nodded. Charlotte is Amelia's child, hidden in plain sight. The ghostly visitor Charlotte saw was you, Clara, searching for proof of Amelia's fate. You dropped the locket, a memento of your brother's love." Lady Eleanor's voice was a hiss. "Amelia is gone. She abandoned her child." "No, madame," Poirot said, his voice cutting. "Amelia did not abandon Charlotte. The journal reveals she was imprisoned, sent to an asylum under a false name to silence her claim. Margaret, Sarah's mother, tried to expose this, but was dismissed. The cigarette case, it was Amelia's, left by the true mastermind." He turned to Edmund, whose face was ashen. "Monsieur Edmund, you knew of Amelia's fate. You set the traps, tampered with the chandelier, to protect the estate's wealth. The cigarette case, you dropped it, in your haste, hoping to mislead us to a non-existent vault, while you hid the real safe in the study." Edmund's hands shook, his voice hoarse. "You can't prove that." Poirot produced the safe's key, found in the study. "This opened a safe I located this morning, containing the original will, naming Amelia as heir. You burned copies, but Margaret hid the truth. Your greed, monsieur, drove you to silence Sarah, to threaten Crane, to trap us." Edmund collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. Lady Eleanor's face was stone, but tears glistened in her eyes. "We thought it was for the best," she whispered. "Amelia was reckless, her marriage a scandal. We protected the family." Poirot's voice softened. "Protection, madam, became betrayal. Amelia, I have learned, died in the asylum, but her daughter lives. Charlotte deserves her birthright." Clara sobbed, hugging Charlotte tightly. Sarah wiped her eyes, her courage vindicated. Crane and Finch exchanged uneasy glances, the village's secrets laid bare. The telegram, Poirot concluded, was Sarah's cry for justice, answered by Hercule Poirot. "The truth, it is unravelled, and justice will follow." As the gathering dispersed, the manor's shadows seemed lighter, the fog outside less oppressive. Hastings clapped Poirot's shoulder. "You've done it again, old chap. But what happens to Charlotte now?" Poirot's eyes were distant. "She will have her inheritance, mon ami, and Clara's care. The Langleys, they must face their past. The little grey cells, they have prevailed." The drawing room emptied, leaving Poirot alone with the telegram, its faded ink, a testament to a mystery solved. The truth, once buried, now stood in the light, and Blackthorn Manor would never be the same. Chapter 13. The final telegram. The fog that had cloaked St. Mary's Hollow for days began to lift as Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall of Blackthorn Manor, his suitcase packed and his overcoat buttoned against the morning chill. The manor, once oppressive with its secrets, seemed quieter now, its shadows softened by the light of truth. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, adjusted his scarf and glanced at the towering staircase where the echoes of their investigation lingered, sabotaged chandeliers, hidden passages, and a faded telegram that had unravelled a family's buried past. "Well, Poirot," Hastings said, his voice a mix of relief and melancholy, "you've done it again. The mystery's solved, the villain unmasked, and young Charlotte's future secured. Not a bad week's work, eh?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled, his moustache curving in a faint smile. "Mon ami, it is not the work of Hercule Poirot alone. The little grey cells, they were aided by your loyalty, by Sarah's courage, by Clara's devotion. The truth, it required us all. He patted his pocket, where the faded telegram rested, its cryptic words now fully understood. The drawing-room confrontation the previous night had laid bare the Langley family's betrayal. Edmund's desperate attempts to conceal the altered will, Lady Eleanor's complicity in banishing Amelia, and Clara's revelation as the sister of Amelia's lost love. Charlotte, revealed as Amelia's daughter, would inherit her mother's rightful share under Clara's care. Edmund faced legal consequences, and Lady Eleanor, humbled by the exposure, had retreated into silence. The village, too, buzzed with the news, its whispers now of justice rather than scandal. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, a soft knock sounded at the hall's heavy oak door. Mr. Grayson, the butler, entered, his usual rigidity softened by a rare hint of emotion. "Monsieur Poirot, a telegram has arrived for you." He handed over a crisp envelope, its paper starkly new compared to the faded one that had started it all. Poirot opened it with his characteristic precision, his eyes scanning the message. "Curious," he murmured, then read aloud, "Monsieur Poirot, our gratitude is boundless. Charlotte is safe, the truth restored. We honor Amelia's memory. Signed, Clara Wentworth and Sarah." Hastings grinned. "Well, that's a nice touch. They didn't have to, you know." Poirot's expression softened. "None, but it is the mark of hearts sincere. Mademoiselle Sarah, who risked all to send the first telegram, and Mademoiselle Clara, who guarded Charlotte's heritage, they have found peace in justice." He tucked the telegram away, his mind already reflecting on the case's intricacies. The cart that would take them to the station rumbled up the drive, its driver, Tom Grimsby, tipping his cap. As they stepped outside, the manor's Gothic silhouette loomed against a clearing sky, its turrets no longer menacing, but merely old, worn by time and truth. Clara and Charlotte stood on the steps, the girl clutching her doll, her eyes brighter than before. Clara's auburn hair gleamed in the sunlight, and she offered Poirot a small, grateful nod. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara said, her voice steady, "you've given Charlotte a future, and me a purpose. We'll ensure Amelia's legacy endures." Poirot bowed, his hat in hand. "Mademoiselle, it is you who have given Hercule Poirot the chance to serve justice. Take care of la petite Charlotte. She is the heart of this tale." Charlotte stepped forward, shyly offering Poirot a small drawing, a child's sketch of a man with a moustache, labelled Monsieur. Poirot's smile widened, and he accepted it with a flourish. "Magnifique, mademoiselle. I shall treasure it." As the cart trundled down the lane, Hastings leaned back, watching the manor recede. "You know, Poirot, this case had everything: secret passages, traps, a lost heir. Almost too much for a simple chap like me." Poirot chuckled softly. "Simple, Hastings, never. Your heart, it sees what the mind sometimes misses. This case, it was not about passages or traps, but about human nature, greed, betrayal, but also courage and love. The Langleys sought to bury their past, but the past, it always rises." Mary's Hollow passed by, its cottages now bathed in sunlight, their shutters open as if the truth had lifted a weight from the entire valley. At the station, the train's whistle signalled their departure, and Hastings settled into their compartment, already dreaming of London's comforts. Poirot, however, gazed out the window, his mind still weaving the threads of the case. The faded telegram, he mused. It was a cry from the past, sent by Sarah to right a wrong. The ink, the coordinates, the locket, all were signs pointing to Amelia's tragedy. Yet, it is Charlotte, the child, who gives meaning to our work. Hastings nodded, his voice thoughtful. You think Edmund and Lady Eleanor will face the music? We, Poirot said. The law will judge them, but their true punishment is the loss of their secrets. The manor, it will heal, under Clara's care, and we, mon ami, return to our lives, ready for the next puzzle. As the train rattled through the countryside, the fields stretching golden under the clearing sky, Poirot opened his notebook, sketching a final note. The truth, once hidden, shines brightest in the light. He closed it with a satisfied nod, his mind at peace. Hastings, watching him, smiled. You're already thinking of the next case, aren't you? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Perhaps, mon ami. The world, it is full of mysteries, and Hercule Poirot, he is never far from their call. The train carried them toward London, leaving St. Mary's Hollow and Blackthorn Manor behind, their secrets laid bare. The final telegram, a note of gratitude, rested in Poirot's pocket, a reminder that even in the darkest shadows, the human spirit could find redemption.